If you've ever been called the strong one, if you've ever done everything right and still feel off, this episode is your permission slip to stop performing and start feeling again. Today's guest doesn't teach people how to go harder. He helps them go deeper. DJ Dickerson-Alejandrino is the founder of Pleasure Led Life, a movement for high performers ready to trade pressure for presence and burnout for embodiment. DJ walked away from medical school and a life of external success to follow the path that made him whole. Now he works with those who are tired of overthinking, addicted to achievement, and quietly unfulfilled, helping them reclaim clarity, intention, and real freedom. This isn't another productivity podcast. This is about mastering the space between knowing and doing and creating a life led by purpose, not pressure. DJ, welcome to Attention is the Currency. So good to have you on the show today.
Man, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
And we're all very excited to hear about this because all that clarity, because I know we have a lot of entrepreneurial viewers and listeners, and these are really, we're going to talk about those core issues that they really face in that. So you walked away from what most people would consider a dream path. What led to that decision?
So about 2012, I had flunked out of college, and there was no way in the world I was ready to tell my mom I didn't make it. So for $50, I purchased my commencement ticket. And you ever had one of those moments where the universe just kind of gives you clarity and it's all there and you're like, nah, there's no way it can be this easy. Let me make it harder. So I heard the summa cum laude give the speech and I'm like, wow, I would love to do that because you could use your thoughts, turn them into words and possibly impact humanity. But what have I done? So at that moment, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do something epic. I'm going to go from academically disqualified for medical school. And for 10 years, I busted my butt. Overnight shifts, sleeping in cars, doing that, where I finally got my opportunity to go to medicine. And the first day I got there, they asked our hands and was like, who believes in vaccines? And I'm not saying they work or they don't work. But what got me was you have these young minds who are ready to think critically. And the first thing you do is beat them into conformity. Okay. The final straw for me was I was in rotations and this woman was supposed to go home and she fought and she didn't really want to do it. Her kidneys were failing, but they were like, hey, you can do your dialysis. You can get out of here. Well, the nurse didn't state that she was bleeding internally. The phlebotomist was late, so they didn't get the blood work in. And when we got the results back, she ended up bleeding out. And the scream that her sister had when she came to pick her up will forever live rent-free in my mind. But that's not the part that bothered me. The part that bothered me was that this became not a negligence issue, but a policy and a procedure issue. And it came to a point where when you have to turn a blind eye to get into a position of status or power, at what point does that blind eye become your true perspective? And I wasn't willing to compromise my values on that. And so that was the moment when I was like, you know what, I'd rather walk away.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's a big shift. Really. And yeah, I've heard many stories along those lines that it's a crucial moment between where you wanted to go and what really broke that thought pattern for you. But what would you say to some of these people who know something's off about what the direction they're going, but they feel afraid to stop performing in that direction? So
I mean, it is challenging because everybody kind of preaches the same path, right?
Yeah.
The harder you work, your merit-based success, you stick your nose in and one day, maybe. And my thing is, if you feel like you're witnessing someone else live the life that's yours, or you're afraid to actually state what your true desires and passions are because they either won't monetize or you're not elite, it's time to start reevaluating the way you think, because a lot of us are really praised on our achievements or what it is that we do. But I'm a firm believer that you can teach anybody to do anything, right? You can, especially with technology and the way that it is, like you can train anybody to do anything. But who you are will determine the way in which you serve. So I want to flip that paradigm. I could care less about what it is that you do, because they're a-hole doctors, they're a-hole politicians. You know, we're not going to get into that. But that position doesn't make you a better person. It's who you are that will be the good person in those positions. And so I help people identify who they are by core values and not their achievements.
Well, you completely shifted direction, and now you're into I get. Well, you're still serving people, because I'm sure that's why you went to medical school, that you wanted to serve and you wanted to help people, really. And then you talking about performance addiction now, a bit more along into your work. Let's talk about the pressure to be the strong one. What does that cost someone over time? Because we all do feel, especially as men, we in society, we feel like we're pressured to be that as well.
I think one of the worst positions a person can be in is when they are deemed successful by their peers. Because when they're unhappy, they feel empty, they feel hollow, it feels like just another checkbox. Who do they complain to? Because the rest of the world feels like they quote unquote made it.
Yeah.
But they want more, they desire more. And so I want people to understand that there is strength in vulnerability. And when people get to this position of where they're constantly performing, they constantly need to reach the next level, because they're waiting for that status, that validation to make them feel whole, but they'll never find it. So when you're the strong one, you feel like you have to do more and achieve more with less, because other people are counting on you. Other people are seeking your recommendations, your validation. And so I give the strong ones an opportunity and a position to let it all go and figure out what actually matters to them, more than what other people require them to be for their life to be better.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, I can really relate on this, because while I do run multiple businesses, and everyone looks at, when things are going rough, everyone's looking at me and they're looking for the answer nowhere else. And also it's always been the same in my family, that although I'm the youngest son, everyone looks at me as the one that's got to put something together. But of course, being high functioning burnout, how does that sneak in even for the most self-aware? Because I consider myself very self-aware and aware of the things around me. How does that really sneak in for the self-aware people that are
I
performing?
mean, if you look at the culture that we praise and we worship, it's sacrifice, it's putting yourself last, right? Before people became entrepreneurs, everybody bragged about skipping breakfast and barely making it to work and the long commutes and doing this. Even in the entrepreneurial space, right? We brag about the 16-hour workday, the 20-hour workday, and that's this badge of honor. But why? Like, who does that really actually help? And so you kind of get caught in that trap when your value and your worth is reflected through the amount of sacrifice and toughness you have. We make jokes and brag about, being caffeinated. We make jokes and brag about, we worked on 4 hours of sleep. We make jokes and we brag about, the lab missing this, missing that. And for what? For people who could care less, for people who, may not even think of you again in passing. So it's just, a lot of the people who do work that hard are very giving people. They put everyone else before their own needs. And I like to preach to be selfishly selfless, because when you fill your own cup and you give from the overflow, you're not going to deplete yourself. You're not going to run on empty. You're not going to burn out, because that overflow will fill from everything else. And then that way you always have something in the tank.
Yeah. It sounds like it's becoming that self-aware. And you flip the script and said clarity is more powerful than consistency as well. Can you unpack that in because we've been reading through your content?
So a lot of times people praise doing repetitive tasks, but if you're being busy and not being productive, what are you actually doing? So if you're clear on what tasks are yours to handle, what tasks you should defer, delegate, or delete, you're moving in a much more efficient, productive space. One of my favorite books is Mastery. And one of the things is like when you get to a place where you're doing more with less energy, less, more efficiency, you're not going to get to this place of someone who's in front of a computer screen for 10 hours a day. When I was in medical school, there were people who would study 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. They did horrible,
Yeah.
horrible. Why? Because they worshiped the consistency, but they didn't have the clarity to be able to kind of move through what they needed to. The ones who were working 4 hours and taking a break, 3 hours and taking a break, they did far better because you got that information, you consolidated it, and you move forward.
Yeah, well, I think it's really the misconceptions of society in there, isn't it? Where they say the athlete is awake before you and goes to bed after you, and that's the elite athlete version. But it's definitely not health aligned for that strategy. How does somebody begin to find that clarity when their life has been built on autopilot ambition? Because obviously they've got all this stuff going on. How do they just start processing that to get to that point?
So I take it to the simplest place you can go, and that is what your identity is. Because name the last time you went somewhere and asked someone who they are. No. Typical first question. What do you do? Right. And for some odd reason, when somebody gives you a job title, that precludes you to want to give some sort of status and respect based upon what they do for work.
Yeah.
But you peel that back a little bit and it's just like, what values do you actually identify with? And that's such a different perspective than the achievements that you garner, because your values will determine how you interact with yourself, how you interact with the people closest to you, and it will determine the way in which you run your business. When people are achievement based, it's easy to burn out because you're burning the candle at both ends. But when you're value based, and I keep it 3 to 5 values because you're multifaceted, but your core is very simple. So with those 3 to 5 values, that determines how you handle emotional conflict, how you handle win-win situations, how you negotiate, how you decide what's worth fighting for and what's worth letting go, how you enforce your boundaries. So these are the simple things, your morning routines, right? I like to call them rituals because I think routines are robotic at times. But what rituals do you provide to yourself? When will you separate yourself and when will you put your foot down? And that all comes from your values. So I take it real simple. We label 3 to 5 core values, and that is who you can identify with because that is your core essence.
Yeah. Well, starting off nice and simple is that sounds it's perfect. Because back to that, it is always interesting the perceptions of people, and every time that somebody asks me what I do for a living is the first question, I always think back. I don't know if you've read The 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss, and at the time he was selling vitamins online, and when people asked him what he did for a living, he goes, "I'm a drug dealer," because he was selling vitamins online for the brain. Which I always think of how can I state my job as a ridiculous thing just to sort of get past that question. Yeah,
and I have my 5 core values because sometimes I think it's hard when people don't know what you represent. So for mine, it's grace, trust, communication, respect, and love.
Yeah.
Right. And I order them in that value because if I'm not graceful to myself and to the others, respect is hard, trust is hard, communication is difficult, and how can you call that love? And so that those 5 values is how I run my personal being, the way I interact with my family, and how I run my business.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, yeah. Well, I always try to do something a lot similar to stick with my core values of because it's helped me over the time also to cut down the work that I didn't really, it wasn't really aligned with the direction I want to go in. So I think it definitely taps into all those areas. And what happens when somebody stops chasing discipline and starts practicing this discernment? It starts, what's the next phase?
So, have you ever seen those people who will turn away money because it's not worth it to them, what they're doing in the current moment, whether they're good at it or not, right? There's some people who love to sew and crochet. They make terrible sweaters, but they will block off time to continue to do it, right? When you start with an instrument, you are terrible. It sounds like nails on a chalkboard,
Yeah.
but that love for what you're doing just continues to pour into it. And then you look, and over time, someone who couldn't play the piano to save their lives or playing, a sonata, or like you were a martial artist. Like right now I'm in Brazil doing jiu-jitsu. Okay.
Yeah.
I just got my butt handed to me by a 40, I'm being nice if I say 50-kilo girl. For
Yeah.
25 minutes, she ragdolled me, and I'm about 95 kilos,
Yeah.
So, but I did it with a smile because I enjoy it, And so
Yeah.
when someone is actually doing things that they really love doing and enjoy doing, life is brighter. They laugh more, they smile more, they give more, and it's just a different energy, not only to witness but to be around and be present for.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, well, it's definitely that progression, and I'm sure you learned a lot of lessons from somebody that had more experience in the ring on that one. And I think it's these days as well that we start to accept that people are at different levels as well in that, and more have had more commitment, had more experience, and in
See, but
the start,
a lot of people won't pursue a hobby if they don't feel they can be elite.
yeah.
And you don't go in for mastery at the beginning. You go in because the love of the activity drew you in, even though you weren't good at it.
Yeah, I think it is a real shame. And these days, from kids my friends' kids and so on, they tend to have that mindset that if I'm not good at it straight away, I'm never going to be good at it, which is it's a real shame in society. I think that's a powerful message that you're no doubt putting out for your work as well. That's helping the world. And you talk about the space between knowing and doing. Why is that space so potent?
So the type of doctor that I wanted to be was a neurosurgeon, right? And so like I'm really fascinated by the brain and the way that it works.
Yeah.
But there's this moment when the brain processes a thought or feeling and someone acts. But a lot of times, one, we assume the thought is ours. Two, we assume that the feelings are true. And a lot of the actions are on autopilot. So if your subconscious programming, as a parent myself, I'm still guilty of it, even though I try not to do it. I parent my kids from a position of convenience for me, so some of their spats and some of the things that I'm telling them is more for like, I prefer for you to do this, and they have to live their own lives, and I've come to terms with that. But a lot of us still have that programming and we can't get rid of it. And so the thoughts are from, fear, like in that gap lives fear, desire, and social expectations. And a lot of us live from fear and social expectations. And so your thoughts are shaped by what the world tells you should be, by what the world tells you should desire. And so a lot of times people are knee-jerk reaction. You got to go to school. You got to get the job that has the degree. It has to pay. I want the family. I want the house. I want the car. I need, this is the right. This is the age I want to be married. I need to settle down by this, or I haven't made it. It's not for me. I help people bring conscious awareness from when you have that thought, when you have that feeling, to when that action takes place, because that conscious awareness then leaks into your subconscious decisions and what I call pleasurable intentions. So when your subconscious actions are in alignment with who you are, your pleasures and your desires, your life's going to be a lot better. The choices you make are going to be a lot better. The moves you make are going to be a lot better. And then you separate from success and you actually start to feel fulfillment. And there's a big difference.
It's yeah. Well, it's definitely the action in there as well. But because people become stuck as well, which you talk about, what keeps people stuck in awareness without action. So they know that they need to make a change, but they get stuck in that awareness field.
Well, because a lot of it is, sure, you know you want to change, but what direction are you changing in? And when people have labeled you successful, are you willing to give up that opportunity cost? Are you willing to potentially start at the bottom of the barrel, the bottom of the totem pole, and sluggishly work your way back up? And that's difficult sometimes. Do you have to go away from your parents' choices? Do you have to go away from grandma's decisions and judgments? And sometimes that's really frightening. And you know their course of life isn't in alignment with yours. But are you willing to enforce a boundary to move for a life that's actually yours, or are you going to be living grandma's life? And so that's frightening.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because they definitely do stay stuck, and I know that it's starting from the bottom. And sometimes when you go back to something, because I've been trying to go back to martial arts, and I feel like I'm starting from the bottom again. A lot of the injuries are there because I've been trying to go back and do Krav Maga, which is a martial arts that I always wanted to push through. But I look at my fitness now in my late 30s than when I used to do it in my 20s, and there's definitely that fear. And you, because when you go in there, they always say, "Oh, have you had any experience?" And of course, everyone's going to run rings around me because I haven't done it in years. So it's yeah. Well, we do definitely have those things that we just have to let go of, because I know that the way that I operate, I would be back up to full speed if I just went and committed for 6 months, and I'd be sort of back into the old rhythm, because it's definitely muscle memory in that case. But yeah,
See,
those
I'd even challenge you to get rid of the timeline expectation,
yeah
because that's going to get you into this place where you feel like you have to meet this randomly prescribed benchmark
yeah
of where you should be, because you created this in your mind of where it's going to be in the future. But present tense happens. Say you roll an ankle on accident walking out of the car, right? So
yeah
now you can't train for 2 weeks. Now, are you going to be on that timeline? Are you going to rush yourself to get back into that? So, with the jujitsu stuff, I'm in my late 30s too. And one of the things that I had to come to terms with, I'm going to get beat up.
yeah
But I'm going to go 70% because I have nothing to prove. I'm here to learn the technique. I'm here to enjoy the art and to be able to express the art in my own form. And
yeah
that's allowed me to kind of separate from, wanting to just go full go all the time, be till I can't keep up with these young bucks. I'll let them enjoy that. This is their time to shine. But you come this way, you gonna have to earn it.
Yeah, well, I guess I've got to. That's where you said you got to let go of a lot of things in there, and those imposed deadlines are part of my entrepreneurial life. Because in order to be progressive in business, we have to say we have to have the business launched on this date at this capacity, and I guess it shouldn't span across my entire life. It shouldn't be something that defines me. I need to delegate those certain skills into the right areas and not have those beliefs across all of the spaces, because it's all yeah, it's the good and bad pressure.
And you want to drive to improve yourself, right? The secret to pleasure is growth. So if you're doing something and it's stale, you're not going anywhere. You're not going to enjoy it. But when you get better is when you improve, and that's a beautiful thing to witness yourself improving and watching it and enjoying it, and yeah.
Yeah. What does it actually mean to lead a pleasure-led life?
So a pleasure-led life is one where you understand you are the person in between the gap, right? So it's your voice choosing what you're led by. It's your actions that are following your desires. You are putting a priority on filling up your own cup, whether that's family, career, home, movement, hobbies, interests, income, contributions, a spiritual journey. All of those are created and crafted by what you desire to live, and you taking those steps to achieve that. And it's placing a priority on fulfillment over success. You're not here just to check boxes. You're not here just to reach milestones. You're here to enjoy the journey, because let's be honest, the past and the future are both imagined. So we kind of fragment a lot of our energy to regret our past and be anxious about our future when we can just enjoy the time now. And that's what a pleasure-led life is. It's that power in the presence, because this is the moment that counts. This is the moment that's real. This is the moment you're alive. So let's enjoy that feeling and actually be alive and live it. Indulge in the senses. Yeah. Be alive when you smell it, when you're moving, when you hear the sound, the sights, the smell. It's just all a beautiful moment.
Being present. Yeah, it's perfect. Or what's the most misunderstood thing about fulfillment? Because you deal a lot with fulfillment, and you obviously, well, you talk to a lot of clients and people, and there's got to be the one thing.
So the misunderstanding about fulfillment is it's in the long term. Fulfillment is in the day to day. When you want to play a piano and you finally understand how to get that scale, when your fingering has slowly improved and you're excited because when you hear the song now, you hear the breakdown of the chords. It's not, I stood in front of the opera house and 15,000 people applauded me. No, that's chasing success. That's glorifying and fantasizing achievement. Fulfillment is the day-to-day of just, the best way I can say it is, you ever woke up and questioned, like, yo, is this it? And then you ever had those days where you're like, yeah, this is my life? Okay, fulfillment is the other end. Fulfillment is, yeah, this is my life, where you look up and the sun just looks brighter. The birds chirping just sounds beautiful. The smells of the food is just delicate and magnificent, where your senses are hiding, and there's no other place you would rather be than in this moment in time right now.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, I feel like there's a lot of people out there right now that'll be listening to this podcast, and they'll be saying that, well, we haven't felt like that in a very long time. That because most people, they're not chasing that life that they actually do want. They're always chasing the next thing and the next thing, as you've said. So tell us about your program, Pleasure Led Life. Who's it for, and what do you offer in your program?
So as a neurodivergent individual, I help neurodivergent entrepreneurs because I don't believe typical roles fit atypical minds. My current offer at this moment is the Keep It 100 challenge. Okay, it's 5 days, one-on-one challenge where we cut the BS We figure out who you are, what your desires are, and we get you moving. And with that jump start, I just like to have people put their money where their transformation is, because that's when the real grit and grind rust away. And then you see this magical unfolding of people. Their smile gets a little brighter, their stance gets a little higher, and just the way they speak about themselves changes dramatically.
That's great. Well, so if people want to begin that journey with you, where can they go?
So they can go to pleasureledlife.com/keep-it-100.
Perfect. We'll make sure that we have that link in the description as well, so people can jump over there. And now we've got to hit our final question for the interview, which is our signature question, and we've prepped it all up for you to make sure that it's very on track with our brand and yours. And DJ, if attention is the currency, what do you believe intention is?
So if attention is the currency, intention is your framework. You can gather as much currency as you want, but if you don't have the framework to grow it, build it, and develop it, it's going to be gone. Look at the people who have flashed into money real quick and lost it overnight because they didn't have the framework to develop it. So intention is the most powerful thing you can do because it dictates what you'll focus on in your present.
That's perfect. And it's also legacy. Intention is legacy.
Yeah, I agree very much so. Because everybody assumes that the legacy is when you go back in time. But no. Legacy starts by the habits you built today.
That's perfect. We'll quote you on that one. DJ, legacy is built on the habits you build today. That's perfect. DJ, thank you for the presence, the truth, and the medicine you brought to the conversation. To everyone listening, if you've been surviving on consistency, productivity, or external validation, it's time to come home. Follow DJ at pleasureledlife.com and start exploring the space between who you've been and who you're finally ready to be. Because attention is the currency, and your intention is what writes the legacy. Thank you very much for joining us again. Thank you, DJ.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.